So this video is in continuation to our previous lesson on the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior. This one, nonetheless, will focus on statistics and how we can use statistics to analyze the data you have collected on specific behaviors and whether the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior has been valid in explaining our decision to engage in that specific behavior. Okay, I just want to give you a disclaimer that I am not a math teacher. I am going to try my best to explain the statistics around this. And also, the statistical test that I have chosen has been based on my understanding of what the theory is demanding in terms of correlational analysis. I have tested it on two data sets that you have shared with me. So far it has been a success story in terms of, yes, okay, this analysis is what is required to understand whether the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior does in fact explain that behavior or that choice or the choice behind that behavior. Okay, so I'm just going to go over what correlational analysis is and what are the values that you will probably get from doing a correlational analysis. Okay, so to begin with, let's do a quick recap of the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior. According to this theory, behavioral intention is what leads to our future behavior or our choice to engage in a specific behavior. We could have a weak behavioral intention, or we could have a strong behavioral intention, or even a moderate behavioral intention. And this would increase or decrease the likelihood of you engaging in a certain behavior. Okay? But behavioral intention is determined based on three major factors. Okay? The first is attitude towards the behavior. Is this behavior going to make you feel happy? Is it going to cause you pain? Is it going to make you upset? Is it going to make you angry? Okay? And is this behavior going to be beneficial for you? Is engaging in this behavior going to help you in some way? Okay, so this will then form your attitude towards that behavior and your intention. Okay, then there's the second factor, which is the subjective norm. Subjective norm is based on the fact of whether people around you in your society, in your culture, whether they engage in that behavior. And we know that that is the descriptive norms, okay? And then there's the other factor, which is, are these people willing to support you in your engagement with that behavior, okay? So if it's, for example, you quitting smoking, okay, hopefully none of you smoke, but if that's the behavior, are your friends going to support your choice to quit, or are they going to pressurize you into continue smoking? Okay, so that is part of subjective norm, and that is also related to your behavioral intention or influencing your behavioral intention. And finally, there's the perceived behavioral control, which is, as the name suggests, how much we think we are in control of actually engaging or basically executing that behavior. Okay, so all three factors then determine your level of behavioral intention. Is it high? Is it low? Is it medium or moderate? Okay, so according to this model and according to the researchers that developed it, they say that there needs to be a positive correlation, okay, which means that if your attitude is increasing in terms of positive attitude, there's high positive attitude, that means that there is high or strong behavioral intention. Okay, so it suggests that there needs to be a positive correlation between attitude towards that behavior and behavioral intention, subjective norm and behavioral intention, and perceived behavioral control and behavioral intention. And finally, that there needs to be a positive and statistically significant correlation between behavioral intention and your behavioral outcome or future behavior. Okay, so basically what this is suggesting is, if scores of all of these increase, this should be increasing as well. Okay, that means that if there's a positive attitude towards that behavior, if there is high support that the person perceives, and if they think that they are highly in control of that behavior, their behavioral intention will be strong. Okay, and if they do have a strong behavioral intention, their likelihood of engaging in that behavior is high. Okay, so that is basically what this theory is suggesting, and that is what we will be testing for in terms of your data and statistical analysis. So again, the hypotheses that you will have is that there is a positive significant correlation between attitude and intention, subjective norms and intention, perceived behavioral control and intention, and finally behavioral intention and behavioral outcome, or future behavior, whichever you want to refer to it as. Okay, so correlation. Correlation is basically the analysis of whether there is a relationship between two variables. Okay, we know there's independent variables and dependent variables. So here it is difficult to determine the independent and dependent because there is no causal relationship. Okay, it's just a relationship. We know that when one increases, what happens to the other, or that is what we are trying to investigate. So there can be no correlation between two variables. Okay, that means that there is no relationship that they share. There can be a positive correlation. One example of positive correlation is the amount of time you spend studying for a test, okay, or the efforts you put into studying for a test. So if you have been putting high efforts or longer hours into studying for that test, that means that you have a higher, or it would be the other way, sorry, it would be on the x-axis. That means that you would have better grades, or your performance on that test would be better, okay? As opposed to, let's say we were testing the amount of time you procrastinate and the effect it has on performance, okay? So then the higher the number of hours you spend procrastinating, lesser your performance will be, okay? So that is basically positive and negative correlation. And for the sake of this study or research or investigation, we're going to be using the Pearson's correlation coefficient, okay? And what that's going to do is help you find out whether there is, in fact, a positive statistically significant correlation. And as I mentioned in the previous class, correlation coefficients usually come between the number -1 to +1, okay? Or +1. So when you do that correlational analysis, there is a score that is drawn from it, and that score is usually between, again, -1 or +1. If it's 0, that means that there is no correlation between your two variables, okay? If it's +1, that means that there is absolute strong positive correlation. Okay, and again, this is a continuum. If it's 0.1, that means that there is a really weak positive correlation. Okay, if it's 0.9, that means that there's a strong positive correlation. And on the other hand, if it's -0.1, there's a weak negative correlation. And if it's -0.8, that means that there is a strong negative correlation. Okay, and that is what the continuum is really about. Okay. So the next value that will be of importance in understanding all statistical analysis is the significance value, also known as the p-value. This value is the probability or likelihood that a relationship between two or more variables is caused by something or some factor other than chance. Chance can be any coincidence. For example, me waking up on the right side every morning and having a good day is based on coincidence. There is no true relationship between these two variables. Whereas, me having a good day might be influenced by whether I think I was productive or not. So what the hypothesis testing seeks to see or investigate is whether I'm actually having a good day because I'm being productive, or is it just a coincidence that these two variables are occurring together at the same time without any true relationship? So what you're trying to see then is to determine is whether your hypotheses can be accepted based on some factor other than chance or coincidence. For the sake of all statistical analysis, we test the null hypothesis, which is the hypothesis that says that there is no relationship between the two variables, no difference in the two groups administered or between two different conditions. My understanding of why this is the case is that the alternative hypotheses or the research hypotheses can take different forms. It can suggest relationships, differences in average scores, okay? It can be differences over time in the case of a repeated measures experiment. This would then make it difficult to test for significance. So instead, there is a standard procedure of testing whether we can accept the null hypotheses or not. If the null hypothesis is accepted, that then means that there is in fact no effect or no relationship. If the null hypothesis is rejected, you can then say that yes, our alternative hypotheses that suggest that there is a relationship or that there is a difference can then be accepted. So it is easier or more feasible to test for the null hypotheses than to test for the alternative hypotheses. And that is why we always assume the null hypotheses. So then, how do we determine whether a hypothesis can be accepted or rejected and whether it is statistically significant? Okay, when doing any statistical test, a p-value is either automatically generated or can be calculated. Once the p-value is generated, it is compared to the probability or amount of chance we are allowing for our hypotheses. This is usually 5% chance or 5% error if you want to call it, okay, that we are allowing. And in some cases can also be as good as 1% chance that we are allowing or 1% error that we are allowing. So if the significance value is less than 0.05, which is basically 5%, it means that your results are statistically significant. Having a significance value less than 5% means that there is less than 5% probability that your null hypothesis is true or is correct, and that there is a 95% probability that your research hypothesis or your alternative hypothesis is true. Okay? Nonetheless, if your p-value is greater than 0.05 or more than 5%, this means that there is more than 5% probability that your null hypothesis is true. So our research hypothesis is then rejected. It takes time to get a hang of this. I still have often times when I have to read the rule of greater than and less than 0.05. So it is okay for you to not get it at first. But the basic idea is if the p-value that you get from your analysis is less than 0.05, you reject your null hypotheses and you accept your research hypotheses. If your p-value is greater than 0.05 or 5%, then you will accept your null hypotheses. It just means that then your variables don't really have a true relationship beyond coincidence or beyond chance. Okay? So these are the basic things that you need to understand before we get into doing our correlational analysis. What I'm going to do next is run you through the steps of how you will analyze your Microsoft Form data. So first step is you will open up your Microsoft Forms and you will download your data as an Excel sheet. Okay? The second step is you will code and score the responses. We know that we have chosen to have most of our responses as strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. So when you are coding or scoring, you will give strongly agree 5 points, agree 4 points, neutral 3 points, disagree 2 points, and strongly disagree 1 point. Okay, and again, I will show you how I coded one of your classmates' responses for the sake of example. After you have coded, you will analyze the correlation between attitude and intention, subjective norms and intention, perceived behavioral control and intentions, and finally, behavioral intentions and future behavior or behavioral outcome. Okay, so you will have to find 4 different correlations basically, and you have to check whether these are positive and significant correlations. That is your major task for class today. And the 4th step is for you to understand what the correlation coefficient is saying about the relationship between these variables, and whether this then validates the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior for your chosen behavior. So for the purpose of the example and to show you how to do statistical analysis, I will be using Jackie's results. He shared his results with me, and I will be using that for the sake of this example. So you have all of your questions for each of the statements, and this is what your participants have responded to. I did mention 10 responses, but I feel like having more sample is better because that does make the statistical analysis better. Usually a good sample size is about 30 people who have responded, and statistical analysis usually works best with a sample greater than 30. So once you have opened up your form, you go to your responses, okay? And these are things that we're not really concerned with. These are, again, just descriptions of, the percentage of participants who responded, strongly agreed, and so on and so forth. But what you're going to do is open or download the file in Excel, okay? So you click on Open in Excel, and it should usually download the response. I don't have Excel on my laptop, but I use a software called SPSS, which is a statistical analysis software that has been developed by the IBM. So I use numbers for the basic stuff, okay? The first step for us after downloading is to score or to code our responses. To begin with, I'm going to get rid of the columns that we don't need, okay? So we don't need that. Okay, so these are the responses that have been found based on each of the statements, okay? This first one is your attitude. Second is subjective norms. The third is perceived behavioral control. The fourth one is intention. And finally, the behavioral outcome. Okay, so what is going to happen is you are going to next score each of these responses, okay? Strongly disagree is going to get 1 point across these, okay? So you're going to give strongly disagree 1 point, you're going to give disagree 2 points, you're going to give neutral 3 points, agree 4 points, and strongly agree 5 points. Okay, so that is going to be the first step. And I'm pretty sure there's a way to just add a function on Excel and it'll automatically do it for you, but I'm going to do it manually, so bear with me. Okay, so it is important for you to code and to score your responses accurately, okay? Once you have done that, you will use Excel, and I will be adding another YouTube link that is not from me lecturing about it or me modeling how to do it, but this is someone else's tutorial on how to do it on Excel. What I will be doing is using SPSS. So I will copy all of these results, okay, and I will go onto my SPSS. Again, this is something that IBM has produced for statistical analysis, I have already defined my variables. Okay, this is the first step that usually occurs when you are doing any analysis or any entry in SPSS. You need to define all of your variables, okay? Scalar, and then I just paste it over here, okay? And again, we are looking at the correlation or the relationship between attitude and intention, subjective norms and intention, perceived control and intention, and finally, intention and future behavior, okay? And again, all of them need to have a positive and statistically significant relationship with one another, okay? So once I already have my data that is copied and pasted into this software, I go to Analyze, okay, and I click on Correlate by Variate. So this is from me already having done it, okay? And the next few steps are slightly tedious, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose attitude and I'm going to put it here, and intention. So this is the first correlation that I'm trying to figure if there is a correlation and what kind of correlation there is. And then I click OK. So I will get a result like this, okay? And this is the correlation coefficient, okay? And these two stars show or indicate that this correlation is statistically significant. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see that it says that it's statistically significant at 0.01 level. So that means that there is only a 1% probability that these results are based on chance, which means that there is actually a strong correlation, okay? And so this is what you're going to get. And here, the coefficient is 0.942. If you look at the -1 to 1, this is very close to 1, which means that there is a strong correlation and a strong positive correlation, which then suggests that attitude and intention are positively and strongly correlated, okay, with statistical significance. And this is, again, in line with the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior. So once I've done this one, I will go on to doing the same for the rest. And the final correlation that I'm going to be testing is intention and future behavior. There, again, has to be a positive correlation between your intention to do that behavior or engage in that behavior and your actual willingness to do that behavior. I will take part in sports today, or I will socially distance, or I will cheat on my next exam, according to Jackie's example. Okay? So that's the final correlation that we're trying to draw. Okay, so I'm not going to further explain each of what I have found from Jackie's results, okay? Because I want you to be able to figure that out based on my teaching of the first one. Again, you will get two numbers, okay? The first one is going to be the Pearson correlation coefficient, okay? See, again, here this is 0.782. This is 0.824 and 0.971. All of them suggest really strong positive correlations. So this is for Jackie's responses, and all of them have shown statistical significance. And again, it is for Jackie to figure out what these responses suggest. I have created another video that I will share with the class at the end of class once you're done with your own analysis and your own presentations. So I want you to know that sometimes you might hear these results. They do confirm the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior, but there might be times when you don't find that positive correlation or there isn't statistical significance. And in that case, if this does happen when you find your results or you find the significance values, if there's a negative correlation or if there's a very weak correlation, like 0.1, then what does it say about that behavior? Or what does it say about the theory itself? Okay, are there drawbacks in the theory, or is there something, a variable that hasn't been considered for that particular behavior? Okay, so you are going to now work on statistically analyzing your data. Okay, first you're going to watch on how to do it using Excel, because I don't think this is something I can share with you, the software. Okay, once you're done that and you've understood how to do it on Excel, you will follow the same steps and you will find the correlation between attitude and intention, subjective norms and intention, perceived control and intention, and finally intention and future behavior. Okay, and just write down the correlation coefficient and the significance values, or whether it says that it is significant or not. And once you're done with that, you see whether there is a positive correlation between those variables. And if there isn't, you are going to evaluate why you think there isn't. Okay, and that is going to be in your presentation of this, of the theory and of your example.